What's happening, Wesley? What's happening, MSU? What's happening, world? We are here again with another Sunday message, and I know that this has been a week. I had another word in my mind, but this has been a week, and it is my prayer and our prayer here at the Wesley that you have been safe, that you are safe, and that this week, although it has been a trying week, that you have learned what is necessary that God was trying to show you in order to grow into the person that's going to make this world a better place. We know that this has been a difficult week, and we don't take that lightly. And then it's our hope that if there's anything that we can do for you, even as we recover from this storm, that you will reach out to us. This week, we're going to take a small deviation away from our series, Questions of the Heart. We were going to dig into why do bad things happen to good people. And in some ways, we're going to touch on that in these moments. But this week has been hard. And we have seen our institutions around the world fail us, whether it be our government, our city government, our institutions, our churches. We've seen failure across the board. As people have struggled and done their best to make do with what was happening this week, we saw a lot of individuals not do so well. Now, that's not to say that we saw a lot of our institutions rise to the challenge. And shout out to all those churches and all those institutions that rose to the challenge to meet the needs of people. But we also learned something about ourselves that I think is, we'll find in the scripture that I'm going to read today, that Jesus was trying to show us in Mark chapter 6, verses 45 through 52. This is a famous passage of scripture, and most of the time it always refers to Jesus walking on water. And that is a miracle indeed. But I think there's something that we can learn in the very last line of this passage that will really inform us, those of us who struggled this week, those of us who felt ourselves asking the question, where is God this week? I think there's something instrumental in this text that goes beyond the miracle of walking on water to the lesson of the loaves. I'm going to read the scripture for us, and it reads, immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side to Bethsaida, and he dismissed the crowd. And after saying farewell to them, he went up to a mountain to pray. And let me tell you, I feel Jesus right here because I've done a lot of prayer, and I'm sure many of you have done a lot of prayer this week. And the scripture says in verse 47, when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on land. And when he saw that they were straining at the oars against the adverse wind, he came toward them early in the morning. That's good right there all by itself, because many of us, just like the disciples, have been straining with this storm, straining in the middle of spaces without power, without water. And Jesus, just like he saw these disciples, also saw us straining in this time. And he had intended to pass them by because he thought, just like we all thought, the storm would pass. Thought that we just go into the storm, we can ride it out and it all be well. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost, and they cried out, for they saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves because their hearts were hardened. What does that mean, Rev? Let me give it to you. In the passage before this one, Jesus did the famous feeding of the 5,000, where he took the small loaf of bread and a small fish, and he multiplied it, and he fed the people. And it was an amazing act of faith. And here again, the disciples are in a place where they have to exercise faith. And when it came time to exercise faith, scripture says that they did not understand because they had forgot the lesson of the loaves. And I believe wholeheartedly that this week, we forgot the lesson of the loaves. We forgot that in order to do right by people and to make sure that the people who we're called to serve are in places where they have the things they need, we forgot the lessons of the loaves. We forgot to prepare accordingly. We forgot to think about what has happened in the past that will prepare us for what happened this week so that we can be in a prosperous place. We forgot the lesson of the loaves. And my challenge to each of you on this day, on this Sunday, as we try to go back to life as normal, don't forget the lesson of the loaves. Don't forget what you had to strive through this week in order to make it to the end of this week. Don't forget how the people who were hurting and the people who lost things, the busted pipes and the damage that happened all across our world and our country, especially in the state of Texas. Don't forget the lesson of the loaves. Please, my challenge to you is that as we move out of this week and ice is melting and things are seemingly going back to normal, please, whatever you do, don't miss the lesson of the loaves. Learn the lesson of the loaves. How can we be more prepared for the next time? Yes, we got to hold our government and hold our institutions and hold our churches and hold each other up to a higher standard so this never happens again. But for each one of us, we have to make sure we don't forget the lesson of the loaves. Because Jesus will walk on the water and come rescue us. And Jesus will make sure that we are okay. But a part of understanding who Jesus is and Jesus making sure that we are okay, that we have to have the faith to believe that it will be. And faith is not just believing, but also putting into practice that thing that will sustain you. And so my challenge to each of us this week, that as we reflect and we want to go back to normal, we want the snow to go away, we want our lights to come back on, and God, I pray that those things happen in a way where we can live abundantly, but let us not forget what has happened. Let us be prepared. Let us do our due diligence, that we don't forget the lessons of the loaves, so that when we move on to the next place that God has for us, we walk into that place with the faith necessary to overcome every single challenge, every single obstacle, natural or otherwise. And that is my prayer, my challenge for you. Don't forget the lesson of the loaves. Next week, we're going to dig deep. But until then, be blessed and know that we're praying for you. Peace.